Imagine the most expensive restaurant in the city, a place where billionaires whisper over champagne and power is served on silver plates. Now picture a woman seated quietly in the corner. She's beautiful, poised, and unmistakably out of place in the eyes of those who think they own the room. Her 3 children laugh at her table, innocent and free, their eyes shining with joy. But those eyes carry a secret. Because when Christopher Langston, one of the richest men in the country, spotted them from across the room, he saw his own face staring back. 3 children. Triplets. And not one of them knew who he was. Before he could take a step, the waiter leaned toward her, his voice cold and cutting. Perhaps families like yours don't belong here. The room grew still, silent, waiting for her to shrink away. But Jasmine Carter did not shrink. She straightened in her chair, her dignity unshaken. And from the other side of the restaurant, Christopher Langston rose. For the first time in years, the untouchable millionaire chose not to stay silent. Just hours before, Christopher had been standing in his glass penthouse, surveying a city he believed belonged to him. At 45, he was a man the world envied. His company, Langston Enterprises, spanned continents. His signature could make or break fortunes. Yet despite all the power, all the praise, there was an emptiness that clung to him, a silence even the roar of the city could not fill. His assistant, Barbara, entered with her usual precision, a woman who had kept his life running smoothly for 15 years. Your reservation at LeBlanc is confirmed. The board members are already there. Her words were routine, expected. But what she placed on his desk was not. A simple white envelope, stamped with the name of a law firm, Carter and Associates. The name hit him harder than any deal ever had. Jasmine Carter. His ex-wife. The woman he had once sworn he couldn't live without, and then abandoned for ambition. He reached for the envelope, his hand trembling, but instead of opening it, he slid it into his desk drawer, as if hiding it could erase the weight pressing down on him. Thank you, Barbara. You can go. That night, LeBlanc was alive with quiet luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over polished marble. Waiters glided noiselessly, carrying trays of champagne to tables where laughter was more calculated than sincere. Christopher sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by men in suits who laughed at Harold's latest story. He nodded, offered the right smile, but his mind wandered. And then he saw her. Jasmine. She was across the room, seated with 3 children who radiated life in a place built for pretense. Her hair was shorter now, framing her face with elegance. She looked older, stronger, but no less beautiful. And those children, 2 girls and a boy, no more than 5 years old, laughed around her like she was the sun. Christopher's heart stopped. The boy's jawline, the tilt of one twin's head, the unmistakable light in their eyes. They weren't just her children. They were his. He was still frozen in place when he noticed the way the staff treated her. A raised hand ignored. A water glass unfilled. A waiter's clipped tone. And then the manager leaned in, his smile sharp as glass. This is an upscale establishment. Perhaps you could keep the children quiet. Families like yours aren't the right fit here. The word struck like a whip. Jasmine's hand rested gently on her daughter's shoulder as the little girl whispered, "Mommy, are we in trouble?" Jasmine kept her composure, her voice steady though her eyes betrayed her pain. "No, sweetheart. We're not in trouble." The room pretended not to hear, but Christopher heard. He heard every word. And for the first time in years, he did not think about deals or profits or appearances. He thought only of the woman he had loved and the children who carried his blood. He stood. The scrape of his chair against marble turned every head. The board members stared, bewildered. The staff stiffened as he crossed the floor, each step echoing with purpose. The manager's expression faltered when he recognized the most powerful man in the room. "Mr. Langston, my apologies. We didn't realize." Christopher's voice was ice. "Didn't realize what?" "That a mother and her children deserve respect." The restaurant fell silent. Every eye followed him as he reached her table. Jasmine looked up, her breath catching. Chris. His name was neither welcome nor unwelcome, but heavy with years of history. He saw it all in her face, strength, heartbreak, resilience. And then he looked at the children, 3 pairs of eyes that belonged to him as surely as the empire he had built. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Are they?" Jasmine's jaw tightened. "They're mine." One of the girls tugged her sleeve, her small voice cutting through the silence. "Mommy, who is he?" Jasmine smoothed her daughter's hair, her eyes never leaving Christopher's. "Just someone I used to know." The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but he could not look away. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, pleading. "No," Jasmine answered, though her voice trembled. "You made your choice a long time ago. You chose your empire over us." He shook his head, desperate. "I didn't know." "Would it have mattered?" she asked, her eyes glistening. "Would you have chosen differently?" He had no answer. The room buzzed with whispers, the weight of judgment heavy in the air. One of the girls tugged Jasmine's arm again, her innocence piercing the tension. "Mommy, can we have dessert now?" Jasmine's expression softened as she looked at her daughter, then back at him. From her purse, she pulled a small card and slid it across the table. "My office number. Call tomorrow. Not for me. For them. If you're serious." He took it, his hand trembling. The man who had built towers and toppled competitors suddenly felt like a child himself, uncertain and lost. As he walked back to his table, the sound of laughter rose again behind him, the bright, unfiltered laughter of 3 children. His children. And for the first time in his life, Christopher Langston realized his empire was hollow compared to what he had just found. That night, in his penthouse high above the city, he sat in darkness with the business card in his hand. Carter Associates. He turned it over and over, unable to let it go. And in the silence he heard the laughter again, echoing through his mind like a song he couldn't forget. For the first time in years, Christopher Langston wanted tomorrow, not for profits, not for power, but for them. Christopher Langston didn't sleep that night. The city glittered outside his penthouse window, but for once he didn't care about the skyline or the numbers scrolling across the ticker on his television. He sat in his leather chair, still in the suit he had worn to LeBlanc, staring at the business card in his hand. Carter Associates. Her name beneath it. Jasmine Carter. He had built a life where nothing surprised him anymore. Until 3 pairs of eyes shattered it in a single evening. He had children. Not rumors, not possibilities. Children. His children. And he had missed 5 years of their lives. Barbara arrived early, as she always did, her heels clicking softly on the marble. She found him still in the same chair. "You didn't go home," she said gently. "This is home," he answered flatly. Then he held up the card. "Tell me the truth, Barbara. Did she try to reach me?" Barbara hesitated, her throat tightening. She had worked for him long enough to know that lies never survived in his presence. She nodded. "Yes. Letters. Calls. Emails. All turned away by your former assistant. She thought she was protecting you." "I should have told you." The word struck deeper than he expected. He wasn't angry at Barbara. The anger was for himself, for being so blind, so consumed by board meetings and mergers that he had ignored the silence that had cost him everything. "She reached out," he whispered. "And I wasn't there." That afternoon, he stood outside a modest brick building with a sign etched in clean lettering. Carter Associates. It wasn't glass and steel like his world. It was grounded, lived in, with children's drawings taped in the reception area and the faint smell of fresh coffee drifting from the back. He almost turned away, afraid of what waited inside, but Jasmine's voice echoed in his memory. "Not for me. For them." Jasmine looked up as he entered her office. She was behind a desk stacked with files, her hair pulled back, glasses perched low on her nose. She didn't rise when she saw him. Her eyes were sharp, guarded, though not unkind. "You came. You told me to." His voice cracked despite his best effort to steady it. "And I needed to." She studied him for a moment before gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "Sit." The silence between them was thick, but it wasn't empty. It was full of years unsaid, of love buried, of wounds left to fester. Finally, she opened a drawer and pulled out 3 thin folders, sliding them across the desk. "Mia. Sophie. James. Everything you should already know but don't. Their allergies. Their medical history. Their favorite foods. Their fears. Their dreams." He stared at the folders as if they were treasure. His hands trembled as he opened the first, Mia's. Photos of a little girl with wide, curious eyes. A note in Jasmine's handwriting. "Asthma mild but watch closely. Loves to paint, often late into the night." Sensitive, perceptive. He swallowed hard and opened the next. Sophie. Mild peanut allergy. Obsessed with the stars. Wants to be a scientist. Quiet but fierce when she's right. He smiled through tears, whispering, "She sounds like her mother." The last James. No allergies. Boundless energy. Loves soccer. Talks to everyone, even strangers. His laughter can fill a room. Chris's chest tightened. The boy's photo was like looking at a mirror from decades ago. Jasmine's voice broke the silence. You missed it all. Their first steps. Their first words. Their first day of school. They know nothing about you except that I once loved you. And that you weren't there. He looked up, shame written in every line of his face. I didn't know. She leaned forward, her eyes flashing. You didn't ask. You didn't even wonder. Because you were too busy building your empire to notice the silence at home. He couldn't argue. He had no defense. I can't change the past. But please, Jasmine. Give me a chance to know them now. Her lips pressed into a thin line. This isn't about what you want. It's about what they deserve. And they deserve consistency, not a man who breezes in for a month and disappears when the board calls. I won't disappear, he said fiercely. Her brow arched. Prove it. She tapped the folders. Start with these. Learn who they are. Then Saturday, 1 o'clock. The park near our house. I'll bring them. But there will be no grand introductions. No claims. You sit. You watch. You show me you can be present without turning it into a performance. If you fail, Christopher, that will be the end of it. He nodded, clutching the folders as if they were lifelines. I'll be there. Early. Her expression softened only slightly. Don't make promises to me. Make them to them. That night, Christopher sat in his penthouse, the folders spread across his desk. For the first time in years, his laptop sat closed, unread emails stacking up like dust. He studied every detail. He memorized their allergies, their schedules, their favorite cartoons. He circled the date of their school play on a calendar, something Barbara had found in one of the newsletters Jasmine had sent years ago. Each evening he sent Jasmine a single text, confirming Saturday, 1 p.m. She never replied with words, only a check mark. It was enough. On Friday night, he sat on the edge of his bed with a storybook in his hands, reading it aloud into the quiet room as if his children were already there. His voice cracked when he reached the happy ending. He closed the book slowly, whispering into the silence, I'll be there. I'll never be late again. Saturday arrived with clear skies and the sound of children's laughter carrying across the park. Christopher was already there, seated on a bench with a simple bouquet of wildflowers at his side. His heart pounding in a way no boardroom had ever managed. For once in his life, he wasn't the man with the empire. He was just a man waiting to see if his children might someday call him father. The park was alive with weekend chatter, the squeak of swings, and the sound of children chasing each other across bright green grass. Parents clustered in small groups, sipping coffee from paper cups, their laughter rising above the shrieks of joy. Among them sat Christopher Langston, silent on a wooden bench, a bouquet of wildflowers beside him. He looked out of place in his tailored suit jacket, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the dirt path. For a man who owned skyscrapers, he had never looked smaller. He checked his watch. Still early. He wanted to be. For once in his life he would not arrive fashionably, not make someone wait for his time. His heartbeat quickened at the sound of children's laughter growing nearer, the rhythm of sneakers on gravel. And then he saw them. Jasmine walked toward the park entrance, her hand holding James's while the twins ran ahead in matching raincoats, their voices high with excitement. Mia's purple hood bounced as she skipped. Sophie's yellow coat trailed behind, her small hands cupped as if catching the morning sunlight. James darted forward, already tugging his mother toward the playground. Christopher rose to his feet without realizing it. Jasmine's eyes met his across the distance. She gave a single nod, not warm, not hostile, simply a reminder. Remember what I told you. He stayed still, his heart in his throat, as the twins raced past him to the swings. James lingered a moment, his wide eyes glancing curiously at the stranger on the bench before tearing off after his sisters. Christopher sank back down slowly, gripping the edge of the bench. Jasmine approached, her expression unreadable. You came early. I said I would, he answered softly. Her gaze flicked to the bouquet of wildflowers. For a moment her lips curved, then straightened again. This isn't a performance, Chris. They don't need flowers. They need presents. He nodded quickly. Then I'll just sit. For the next hour, that's exactly what he did. He sat and watched, his eyes never leaving the children. He watched Mia climb too high on the jungle gym. Watched Sophie stop to study the pattern of ants along the path. Watched James kick a ball toward a group of older boys and laugh when they let him join. His heart swelled with every laugh, every tumble, every small ordinary miracle. Eventually, Jasmine walked over to the swings, calling them back. Mia, Sophie, James, come here. Her voice carried gently but firmly. The children ran to her side, breathless and flushed. She crouched down to their level. This is Christopher. He's your father. The world seemed to pause. James tilted his head, studying the man on the bench. You look like me. Christopher's breath caught. He knelt so he wasn't towering over the boy. His voice trembled. It's the other way around. I look like you. Sophie's gaze was sharper, older than her years. Where were you? His throat tightened. The truth was heavy, but he forced it out. Lost. In all the wrong things. I should have been here. Mia reached for his hand suddenly, her small fingers curling around his. Your eyes are sad. Tears blurred his vision. He closed his hand gently around hers, unable to speak. For a moment, it felt as if the world had given them permission to start over. The children asked him simple questions, his favorite color, whether he liked soccer, if he could draw. He answered each one with a quiet smile, marveling at how natural it felt to kneel in the dirt and listen to them chatter. For the first time in years, he wasn't Christopher Langston, CEO. He was simply a man discovering his children. And then heels clicked against the gravel path. The sound cut through the laughter like a warning bell. Eleanor Langston appeared, her silver hair perfectly styled, her pearl necklace gleaming against a tailored black coat. Beside her walked Richard, his tall frame bent with age but his gaze still sharp. Christopher. Eleanor's voice carried across the park, each syllable laced with disapproval. We've been looking for you. Jasmine stiffened, her hand instinctively resting on Sophie's shoulder. Christopher rose, his body tensing. Mother. Father. Eleanor's eyes moved past her son to Jasmine and the children. Her lips pressed thin. So it's true. Richard's expression softened as he studied the children, but Eleanor's did not. She took a step closer, her heels sinking slightly into the grass. We'll handle this quietly with counsel. The children belong in a proper home. Not what? Jasmine's voice was steady, though her eyes flared. Not with their mother? Not with the woman who has raised them every day of their lives, while your son built an empire too big to notice they existed. Eleanor's chin lifted. You don't understand what's at stake. Their future. Their future is right here. Christopher cut in sharply, his voice echoing. The children flinched, not from his anger but from the weight of it. He lowered his tone, kneeling again so he was level with them. Their future is not boardrooms and legacies. It's soccer games, science fairs, paintings taped to the fridge. James slipped his hand into Christopher's, his small fingers clinging tightly. Mia edged closer, her wide eyes watching. Sophie stood straighter, her jaw set like her mother's. Eleanor's voice softened only slightly. Christopher, think carefully. These children are blood, deserve the world. But the world you're offering is chaos. Christopher turned, his voice calm but unshakable. The chaos is mine. The love is theirs. And for once I choose them. The park had grown quiet. Parents nearby pretended not to listen, but every eye was drawn to the confrontation. Eleanor's lips tightened as though she had swallowed something bitter. Richard finally spoke, his voice quiet, almost pleading. Eleanor, let it be. Look at them. They don't need another battle. They need peace. For a moment Eleanor faltered. Her eyes flicked to the children, then to Jasmine. But pride won out and she turned sharply, heels clicking as she walked away. Richard gave his son a long look, half regret, half hope before following. The silence that followed was heavy. Christopher looked down at the three faces watching him with questions too big for their small voices. He swallowed hard. I can't undo the years I lost. But I can be here now. If you'll let me. James leaned against him, his head resting against Christopher's arm. Mia slipped her hand back into his. Sophie's eyes softened just slightly and she whispered, "Don't break your promise." Tears burned his eyes as he nodded. "Never again." Jasmine watched, her arms folded, her gaze unreadable. But as the children clustered around him, her lips trembled into something almost like a smile. For the first time, Christopher wasn't sure if he had won or lost. He only knew that for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he belonged. The Langston household had always been a fortress of glass and steel, silent hallways echoing with footsteps of assistants and board members rather than laughter. But that evening, for the first time in years, the quiet was broken by the sound of children's voices. The triplets were sprawled across Christopher's penthouse living room. A fortress of couch cushions turned into a castle. Jasmine sat cross-legged on the carpet, amused and watchful, though her eyes betrayed unease. This was still unfamiliar territory, and trust was a fragile bridge. Christopher moved among them with surprising ease. He set out juice boxes, peeled clementines, even joined James in stacking blocks into a lopsided tower. The man who once signed billion-dollar contracts without blinking now crouched in a suit that wrinkled against the floor, carefully balancing a wooden block so it wouldn't topple. Mia sat apart, sketching quietly with the colored pencils her father had brought. She coughed once, a small rasping sound, and Jasmine's head turned immediately. "Are you all right, baby?" Mia nodded, waving her mother off, her little hand still coloring. But Christopher noticed too. The cough lingered, dry and tight, and when she exhaled there was a faint whistle. He looked to Jasmine, his expression tightening. "Is that normal?" "She has asthma," Jasmine explained, her voice clipped. "Usually her inhaler keeps it controlled." She reached for her bag automatically, producing the small blue device, but Mia shook her head. "I'm fine, Mommy." Christopher crouched in front of her. "Sweetheart, even strong girls sometimes need help. Let's take it just in case." His voice was gentle, coaxing. Reluctantly, Mia accepted the inhaler and took a puff, then returned to her sketch. For a while the moment passed. They ate pizza that Christopher had clumsily ordered, laughing when the delivery man gawked at the billionaire opening his own door. They played charades, James insisting on acting out a soccer game so wildly that cushions flew. For a brief span, the penthouse was not a sterile monument to wealth, but the home of a father trying desperately to make up for lost years. But later that night everything changed. The children were curled in a makeshift blanket fort, their tiny breaths slow and even. Jasmine was gathering stray crayons when she heard it. A harsh, choking sound. She spun toward the fort. Mia was sitting up, her face pale, her chest heaving as she tried to draw breath that wouldn't come. "Mia!" Jasmine's voice cracked as she rushed to her daughter's side. She grabbed the inhaler, shaking it furiously, but Mia's breaths came in short, panicked gasps. "It's not working," Jasmine whispered, terror clawing at her throat. Christopher was already on his feet, his phone in his hand. "I'm calling an ambulance." His voice shook, but his movements were swift, decisive. He dropped to his knees beside them, pulling Mia into his arms. "Stay with me, princess. I've got you." The minutes blurred into chaos. The blare of sirens, the rush of paramedics through his marble lobby, the cold clatter of medical equipment. Jasmine clutched Sophie and James close as tears streamed down their cheeks. Christopher rode in the ambulance, his arms wrapped around his fragile daughter as oxygen hissed into her mask. At St. Mary's Hospital, harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic air closed in around them. Doctors swept Mia through swinging doors, her tiny form swallowed by machines. Jasmine followed, but a nurse held her back. "We need space to stabilize her." She collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking, her children huddled against her sides. Christopher stood motionless, fists clenched, his expensive watch glinting under the hospital lights. For all his power, all his influence, he was utterly helpless. Hours dragged by. The twins fell asleep on the stiff plastic chairs, their small heads resting against their mother. Jasmine stroked their hair absently, her gaze locked on the double doors that had swallowed Mia. Christopher paced, every so often stopping to stare at the doors as if willing them to open. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket. Messages from Barbara, from board members, from investors demanding his presence at a merger signing scheduled for the next morning. He ignored them all. Finally, a doctor appeared. Exhaustion etched into her features. Jasmine leapt to her feet, her heart pounding. "How is she?" "She's stable," the doctor said, her voice calm but firm. "It was a severe asthma attack. Her airways were dangerously constricted, but the medication worked. We'll keep her overnight for observation." Relief crashed over Jasmine so hard her knees nearly buckled. She pulled Sophie and James close, whispering thanks to heaven. Christopher's head dropped into his hands, silent tears tracing down his face. When they were finally allowed to see her, Mia looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her chest rising and falling under a tangle of wires and tubes. Jasmine brushed her daughter's hair back tenderly. Christopher sat on the other side, his large hand engulfing her tiny one. "Daddy," Mia whispered weakly, her voice muffled by the oxygen tube. "You came." "Always," Christopher said, his voice breaking. "I'll always come for you." For a moment, there was only the steady beeping of the monitor, the soft hum of machines. Jasmine lifted her eyes, meeting Christopher's across the bed. For once there was no blame in her gaze, no bitterness. Only raw fear and relief, and something unspoken that bound them together. When morning came, Christopher didn't leave. He ignored the relentless calls about the merger. He canceled meetings, silenced alarms, told Barbara through gritted teeth, "Handle it. My family comes first." The headlines that week screamed of chaos at Langston Enterprises. Billions at risk, a CEO absent during a critical signing. But for Christopher, the world outside the hospital walls barely existed. All that mattered was Mia's slow, steady recovery, the way her eyes lit up when she spotted him still sitting at her side, unshaven and exhausted but there. Jasmine watched him carefully, waiting for the moment when he would slip back into old habits, when business would eclipse everything else. But it never came. He read bedtime stories aloud in the hospital, brought Sophie and James sketchpads to keep them busy, and held Jasmine's hand without even realizing it during long silences in the waiting room. It was here, in this sterile room filled with machines and fear, that Christopher Langston's empire cracked for good, and something far more important took its place. The city never slept, but in Christopher Langston's penthouse, the lights were dim and the phones silent. Days had passed since Mia's hospitalization, and the air of the place no longer hummed with the restless energy of corporate power. Instead, it carried the faint smell of crayons, the sound of children's laughter, and the steady presence of a man learning to be a father. Mia was home now, fragile but stronger, her breathing steadier under careful routines. Every evening, Christopher set up her nebulizer, sitting by her side as she painted during the 20-minute treatment. He called it art time, and while Mia sketched stars and flowers, he memorized every detail of her face, every sigh of concentration. Sophie and James had carved out their own spaces too. Sophie had claimed the corner of his office, filling it with science books and a second-hand telescope Christopher had installed by the window. James, restless and full of energy, had discovered the joy of kicking a soccer ball down the polished hallway, his laughter bouncing off the walls. For the first time, the penthouse felt alive. Barbara had noticed the change too. She arrived one morning with her usual stack of documents only to find Christopher sprawled on the carpet, drawing lopsided constellations with Sophie while Mia colored beside them. James darted around in pajamas, shrieking with joy. "Sir," Barbara said cautiously, holding the contracts. "The board meeting is in 1 hour. They're expecting you to present in person." Christopher looked up from the floor, his tie loosened, his hair unkempt. "Cancel it." Barbara blinked. "Cancel, sir. This is the quarterly review. Investors are nervous. They're already upset about you missing the merger last week. Shares are slipping." He turned back to Mia, helping her switch colored pencils. "Cancel it anyway." Barbara hesitated, then set the papers aside. There was no defiance in her face, only quiet admiration. She had worked for him for over 15 years, seen him command boardrooms and cut deals with a flick of his pen. But this man with a child leaning against his shoulder was someone she barely recognized. Someone better. Later that night, when the children had finally drifted off, Jasmine lingered by the window, watching the city lights blink against the dark. She spoke without turning around. "You're risking everything." Christopher stood behind her, his hands shoved into his pockets. No. I already risked everything when I chose money over you. Over them. I'm not making that mistake again. She turned then, her eyes sharp. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't some charity gala you can walk away from. It's your company. Your father's company. Thousands of people rely on you. I've given them 15 years, he said softly, but with steel beneath the words. 15 years of my life, my soul. And what did it get me? An empire built on sand. I miss first words, first steps, birthdays, everything that mattered. The company can survive without me. My children cannot. Jasmine searched his face, waiting for the arrogance she had always known, waiting for the self-preservation that had once driven every choice he made. But it wasn't there. For once there was only truth. The following morning, the world gasped when Christopher Langston arrived at headquarters unshaven, tieless, and carrying no briefcase. He stood in the boardroom before men and women who had once bowed to his every command. Their eyes widened when he slid a single sheet of paper across the table. My resignation, he said simply. The room erupted with voices, panic, disbelief, fury. You can't do this, one executive shouted. The market will collapse. The press will crucify you. Your father. Christopher raised a hand, silencing them. His voice was calm, but it cut through the noise like glass. For years I believed success was measured by headlines and balance sheets. I was wrong. Success is measured by what you don't lose along the way. I've already lost too much. Chris, another board member pleaded. You built this empire. It's your name on the towers. You can't walk away. He straightened his shoulders. I'm not walking away. I'm stepping back. I'll keep my shares, but Barbara and the VPs will handle operations. From now on, I'll be present as an advisor, not a ruler. My children need a father more than this company needs a king. The words left no room for argument. He turned and walked out, leaving the boardroom stunned into silence. By the afternoon, the headlines had shifted from outrage to fascination. Billionaire chooses family over fortune. Langston empire in transition. Social media buzzed with speculation, but Christopher barely glanced at any of it. For the first time in his adult life he felt light. Unshackled. That evening, he returned to Jasmine's modest home instead of the penthouse. He carried a box under his arm, heavy with framed photos, art supplies, and 3 small jerseys he had picked up at a sports store. What's this? Jasmine asked warily as he placed the box on the table. He smiled faintly. A start. I bought a house near here, something with a yard near good schools. I want them to have space to run, to play, to just be kids. I'm moving in next week. Not with you, he added quickly, catching the flicker in her eyes. Into the guest house out back. You'll have your space. I'll have mine. But the kids will have both of us side by side. For the first time Jasmine's guard faltered. Her eyes softened, though she said nothing. The children, however, needed no convincing. James clapped his hands and hooped. Sophie peppered him with questions about telescopes and science fairs. Mia only leaned against his arm, whispering, Can we paint the walls purple? Yes, he said without hesitation, his voice breaking. Purple, yellow, green, whatever you want. It's your home too. That night, after the children were tucked into bed, Christopher lingered in the quiet kitchen. Jasmine joined him, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face tired but calm. You really did it, she said softly. He nodded. I did. Her gaze held his for a long moment. Then maybe we can try this. Not for us. For them. Christopher's chest tightened, but he only nodded. For them. Always. Outside, the night sky stretched above them, vast and filled with stars. And for the first time Christopher Langston felt like he was standing at the beginning of something real. Not a boardroom. Not an empire. A family.